All right, on to video 2 of 3 for World War I kind of um, DLD lectures. Okay, so in this video, we're looking specifically at the domestic impact. So what's happening on the home front? So while the majority of World War I is being fought kind of in Europe, what is happening here in America? So let's take a look. Okay. First thing that we need to look at is kind of our economy. Okay. Um, Mobilization or kind of prepping for war really changes a lot of things um, for the economy, right? We really get involved in new industries and expand on labor, right? We're kind of prepping for war. We're building new things. We're opening new factories. Okay. And so what's going to happen is the government's actually going to get involved. Okay. So remember, think back to the Gilded Age and kind of how the government refused to do much, right? Very laissez-faire. And then we saw that kind of change in the progressive era, and we're going to continue to see that change in the government step in. So what they're going to do is they're going to organize private businesses, essentially saying, hey, this is what you need to make. So let's give an example. Let's say we've got John, okay? And John owns a factory that used to make baseball bats, okay? So something made of wood that's used kind of for leisure purposes. Okay, when we're at war, we're not focused on leisure anymore. So the government might go to John and say, hey, instead of making baseball bats, you are now making the wooden part of a rifle, right? The kind of the butt of the gun. That's your responsibility now, John. Thank you very much. Okay, so we see how the government gets involved and starts kind of directing factories to operate in this wartime economy. Okay. Next, war is expensive. Okay. It's very, very costly, and we're going to need to raise a ton of money. Okay. And we're going to do that by selling Liberty bonds. Okay. So essentially, Americans buy this piece of paper, right? They transfer their savings to the federal government. Okay. In exchange for this paper that they can then cash in later for more money. So essentially, it's a loan to the United States government. But it will generate tremendous, tremendous revenue here in America, around $33 billion. Okay, so we're really able to finance the war. And then lastly, we need a little bit more than that. We're going to increase taxes as well, right? We need you to really focus and do your part. Okay, we're going to kind of sell it as a patriotic thing, right? A Liberty Bond. Doesn't that sound like good old Uncle Sam is really being supported? Okay, so we're going to kind of use language to convince American folks to do their part. Okay. Now, things are going to change politically as well. Okay. Think back to what I said when we originally said we're remaining neutral, right? Wilson noted that there's a tremendous amount of Americans that are from Europe. Okay. Specifically, we do have a lot of Germans. Okay. Now that's kind of an issue because Germany is essentially our #1 enemy. Okay. So we're very, very concerned about kind of the proportion of Germans in our population. Okay, we start to worry about spying. We start to worry about folks disrupting our military in our draft and things of that nature. Okay, so we're kind of going to put folks on lockdown a little bit. Think back to Abraham Lincoln, right? You lost rights during the Civil War. Okay, with the writ of habeas corpus, right? You could be sent to jail. Your rights can be diminished during times of war. And we see that happen yet again here with the Espionage Act. This essentially makes it a crime, obviously, for spying, disrupting the draft, doing anything anti-war is going to be a problem. Okay. Now you might argue, hey, that's a disruption of my freedom of speech. Yes, but again, we're at war. Things are different. Okay. Another one is something that should kind of be familiar, the Sedition Act. Think back to John Adams, the Alien and Sedition Act. Remember, sedition, specifically kind of talking bad about the government. Okay, we're bringing that back. It makes it a crime to talk poorly about America. Okay. Now this time it's not because our feelings are hurt, it's because, hey, we're at war. Things are a little serious. We need you to not talk about it. Okay. And so we do see a disruption of your rights. Okay. But our excuse is this is war. Things are different. Okay. Now, politically, we do see the rise of socialism. Okay. Or communism. Okay. But we're going to kind of deal with that in a major way. So Eugene Debs is one of the socialist leaders on the rise. Okay. And he is going to make anti-war speeches, and we are going to accuse him of a crime under that Espionage Act. You're talking poorly about the war, you're disrupting the war movement. We will actually place him in jail for 10 years. So we are very, very serious about this disruption of your civil rights. Okay. And we make it very clear with Eugene Debs. Okay. This is simply another example of us really upholding that espionage rule in the court case Schenck versus the United States, so a Supreme Court case. A fella was handing out anti-draft pamphlets, okay, so disrupting our war effort, okay, and so he violated the Espionage Act, okay, and essentially he goes to court saying, hey, you can't actually send me to jail for this Espionage Act because you're violating my First Amendment, my freedom of speech. And we argue, the Supreme Court argues, hey, actually, if there's a clear and present danger, if we are at war, if we deem it necessary, we can take away your First Amendment. So really that just kind of upholds this idea. So Schenck versus the United States, I would certainly know that case. Very, very important landmark Supreme Court case. Socially, specifically with Black Americans, we have the Great Migration. I'm not really going to go over this in great depth because I already have. Think back to the tremendous amount of lynchings that are happening in the South and kind of the conditions that are there at present, okay? And then think about kind of the mass movement of white men to Europe to go fight the war effort, okay? So what we see is we see a lot of positions open up in factories for Black Americans, okay? So they're going to leave the South and move to the North in great numbers to work in the factories and fill those positions. Okay, on a similar note, we will see a influx of Mexicans into America under the Bracero program. Okay, so again, a lot of white folks leave the farm to go fight in World War I. We have a shortage of labor. Okay, so we are going to come to an agreement with the Mexican government to send folks over legally to the United States under a short-term contract. So they come and work the farms in this seasonal work. Okay. Ultimately, a very successful program that does bring lots and lots of Mexican immigrants over. Temporarily, yes, but some will choose to stay long term. Okay. And then women, last but not least, they are going to see some social changes. What you see is very similar to kind of the Second World War, which I guess we haven't gotten there yet. But you all know Rosie the Riveter, right? Women step up and do their part, okay? Which certainly does happen in the First World War as well, okay? They step up and they believe that they should be rewarded with suffrage, and ultimately they will be, okay? So I know that we already talked about the 19th Amendment during the Progressive Era, but it really doesn't come to fruition until after the First World War as kind of a reward for their services. All right, so that's 2 out of 3. You have one more PowerPoint to get through. All right.